What if every single piece of ice on Earth, every glacier, ice sheet and frozen cap, melted overnight? No slow thaw over centuries, no gradual adjustment for nature to adapt, but a single impossible moment where the world wakes up to a planet stripped of its icy armor. At first it might sound almost beautiful. Crystal clear waters flowing freely, polar landscapes transformed into open seas. But beauty is deceiving. This change would unleash a chain reaction of destruction so vast that the maps we know today would be worthless within hours. Imagine the white peaks of the Himalayas dissolving into raging rivers, the Antarctic's colossal ice walls collapsing into a boiling ocean, and the frozen crown of Greenland vanishing like a mirage. Coastal cities, home to hundreds of millions, would vanish beneath walls of water taller than buildings. Entire nations would be erased before breakfast. And the most terrifying part? The chaos in the first day would only be the beginning, because the real danger isn't just the flooding. By the end of this journey, you'll discover the hidden domino effect that could push Earth into a completely different climate, a version of our planet where humans may no longer belong. Right now, Earth's frozen reserves hold an almost unimaginable amount of water. Over 26.5 million cubic kilometers locked in glaciers, polar ice sheets, and mountain caps. Antarctica alone stores about 60% of the world's fresh water, with ice so thick it reaches depths of more than 4 kilometers. This ice isn't just decorative, it acts as a giant planetary thermostat. Its bright white surface reflects sunlight back into space, keeping global temperatures stable and preventing runaway warming. But if all of it vanished in one night, that balance would collapse instantly. Sea levels would surge by an estimated 70 meters, enough to drown every single coastal city on Earth. This isn't a gentle rise you could adapt to. It's an immediate, unstoppable flood sweeping across continents. Iconic skylines, ancient cultural landmarks, and entire countries would disappear beneath the waves before rescue plans could even begin. And while the world's attention would fix on the drowning coastlines, an even more dangerous threat would be silently unfolding in the background. Without the reflective shield of ice, Earth's darker oceans and land masses would absorb far more heat, triggering a temperature spike that could set off a chain reaction in the climate system. To grasp the scale of what's coming, we need to start in the chaotic first 24 hours after the melt. Within hours of the ice melting, the world's coastlines would become unrecognizable. Massive walls of water, not gentle tides but violent churning tsunamis, would surge inland, swallowing everything in their path. Cities like New York, London, Shanghai, and Rio de Janeiro would vanish beneath water that rushes in faster than evacuation routes could handle. Iconic monuments, the Statue of Liberty, Christ the Redeemer, the Sydney Opera House, would disappear from view, their shapes distorted under meters of swirling floodwater. In low-lying nations such as the Maldives, Tuvalu, and Bangladesh, the land itself would simply cease to exist, erased completely from the map in a matter of hours. Ports would be destroyed, ships hurled into city streets by the force of the waves. Airports near coastlines would be flooded beyond recovery, cutting off rescue or supply efforts. Inland rivers would backflow, turning major waterways into destructive channels carrying debris, toxic chemicals, and seawater deep into agricultural land. Power plants along the coasts would short-circuit, plunging entire regions into blackout, just when communication and coordination are most critical. Billions of people would be forced to move at once, sparking the largest and most desperate migration in human history. And yet, while this human tragedy unfolds in plain sight, the planet's own systems, oceans, atmosphere, and ecosystems, would already be shifting toward a new, more dangerous balance that humanity might not survive. With the reflective ice gone, Earth would suddenly absorb far more heat from the sun. This isn't a slow warming over decades, it's an immediate amplification of the planet's energy intake. Ocean temperatures would start climbing at alarming rates, fueling storms of unprecedented power. Hurricanes and typhoons would grow in size and intensity, drawing on the warmer waters like never before, striking inland areas already overwhelmed by floods. The sudden influx of fresh water from the melted ice would disrupt ocean salinity, which in turn would destabilize the delicate conveyor belt of currents that regulate our climate. Systems like the Gulf Stream, which keeps Western Europe's winters relatively mild, could grind to a halt, plunging parts of the northern hemisphere into brutal extended cold spells even as the rest of the world swelters. This uneven climate chaos would spark extreme weather everywhere. Mega droughts in some regions, relentless rainfall in others, and freak temperature swings that destroy crops overnight. Volcanoes and earthquakes might even become more frequent in certain areas due to shifts in pressure, as massive ice weights are suddenly removed from the crust. The Earth, in effect, would be entering a violent transition period, searching for a new equilibrium. But in that search, entire ecosystems and societies could be wiped out before stability ever returns. As the waters settle into their new expanded boundaries, humanity would face a crisis unlike anything in recorded history. Inland regions that were once sparsely populated would become overcrowded overnight as billions flee from now submerged coastlines. Refugee camps the size of entire cities would spring up in places unprepared to sustain them, leading to food shortages, disease outbreaks, and violent competition for resources. Agricultural collapse would be inevitable. Some of the world's most fertile lands, river deltas, coastal plains, and estuaries, would be gone, replaced by salty wastelands incapable of supporting crops. With fisheries also devastated by sudden changes in salinity, temperature, and habitat loss, entire food systems would break down, pushing global hunger to catastrophic levels. Wildlife would be equally unprepared. Entire species dependent on polar ice, like penguins, polar bears, and seals, would vanish almost instantly, while coral reefs, already stressed by warming waters, would face mass bleaching events and die-offs on an unprecedented scale. The ripple effects would cascade through food chains, collapsing marine ecosystems and further reducing humanity's ability to harvest from the oceans. Politically, the chaos would ignite conflicts over freshwater, arable land, and safe territories. Borders would be redrawn by force as nations scrambled to secure livable zones. Economies would crumble under the weight of mass displacement, infrastructure loss, and resource scarcity. For many, survival would no longer be about thriving. It would be about finding any place left on Earth where life was still possible. From a scientific standpoint, the scenario of all Earth's ice melting overnight is impossible. The sheer amount of energy required to liquefy 26.5 million cubic kilometers of frozen water in less than 24 hours exceeds anything our planet has experienced in its 4.5 billion years. However, even if the process took centuries instead of a single night, the devastation would still be extraordinary. Sea levels would rise steadily but relentlessly, permanently altering coastlines and forcing migrations on a scale we've never faced. Glaciologists and climate scientists are already observing alarming acceleration in polar ice loss. Greenland is shedding ice at rates that were once predicted for the end of the century, and Antarctica's western ice shelves are destabilizing faster than models anticipated. This isn't just about water levels. It's about the collapse of a finely tuned climate system that depends on the reflective, cooling power of ice. Without it, the Earth's albedo, its ability to reflect sunlight, drops, absorbing more heat, melting even more ice and fueling a vicious feedback loop. Furthermore, the freshwater influx into the oceans disrupts the thermohaline circulation, destabilizing currents like the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC, which in turn disrupts weather systems globally. This means the dangers we imagine in our overnight melt scenario aren't pure fantasy, they're warnings. The difference is only in timing. What nature would take centuries to unfold, humanity's actions are compressing into decades. The clock is already ticking. But here's the most chilling possibility, the one scientists hope we never get close to. Without the massive ice sheets to regulate our planet's temperature, Earth could tip into a runaway greenhouse effect. This is the same catastrophic climate spiral, believed to have turned Venus from a once potentially habitable world into a blistering wasteland where surface temperatures melt lead. On Earth, losing the reflective shield of ice would drastically accelerate warming. Darker oceans and land masses would trap more heat. Water vapor, itself a potent greenhouse gas, would saturate the atmosphere, and weather systems would spiral into permanent instability. In this extreme scenario, Rising temperatures could push the oceans toward a slow boil, releasing more CO2 and methane from thawing permafrost and ocean floors, further feeding the warming loop. Over centuries, this could strip the planet of its remaining water, leaving behind a scorched, lifeless shell. Humanity wouldn't survive such a transformation, and neither would most life forms we know today. And yet, as frightening as that sounds, there's an even stranger question lurking in the shadows. What if the melting of Earth's ice was only the first step? What if, instead of climate collapse, the real threat came from above, like the sun suddenly expanding and pushing our planet even closer to this nightmare? That's the question we'll explore in an upcoming What If episode, and the answer will make this scenario feel tame by comparison. If this journey into a world without ice shook your perspective, then it's time to take the next step. The scenario you just witnessed might be hypothetical, but the science behind it is real, and it's unfolding right now in slow motion all around us. The difference is that, unlike in our overnight melt disaster, we still have time to act, learn, and prepare. That's why your engagement matters. By subscribing to this channel, you're not just following another curiosity video, you're joining a community that asks the questions others avoid, that looks straight into the what if and dares to imagine the answers. So here's your challenge. In the comments, tell us exactly where you would go if the oceans suddenly rose by 70 meters. Would you retreat inland to higher ground? Would you try to adapt and live with the water, building floating cities? Or would you look for a way to leave Earth altogether? Your answers might inspire our next story, because here, the conversation doesn't end when the video does. It begins. And don't forget, in our next What If episode, we'll dive into an even more extreme scenario. What if the sun suddenly expanded? If you thought water was the ultimate threat, wait until you see what fire can do. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and get ready. Because in our universe of impossible questions, the most dangerous one is the one you never thought to ask.